I'm trying to apply that sort of perspective changing stuff as it pertains to theological concepts, because
Hmm.
even though I've
Oh,
said, what?
well, and then it went into religion and philosophy, right? That's when I first came in.
Yeah, religion and philosophy.
Well, I would say
Um,
there is truth in other religions, certainly, and that's why they exist.
So there's an interesting concept that I've been thinking about that I've found that is very helpful is that the idea that two things can be true at the same time. Like I find a lot of arguments that people have is that well this is true therefore no other like words can also be a true statement.
Right. Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to actually be right if you look at how things are. You can say two statements about a thing and they can both be true.
Right.
You use different words to make true statements.
that
And it
that
doesn't
kind
change
of,
the thing
But if they
upon which.
contradict each other, then that doesn't work.
Right, but a lot of times people, or not necessarily people, but there's a lot of cases where you contradiction is assumed rather than actually determined. I think more
right.
often than not.
Yeah. It's certainly the case with causality.
Yeah, it happens a lot with like people trying to argue like science
Right.
and Christianity, like eliminating the other, and most of the time it
That's actually not. Yeah, then that's obviously
through the train.
like
Through the
obviously.
logic, like, wait, no,
Yeah.
you're both right, and there's no reason why you both can't be right.
Right.
Well, yeah, science, in my opinion, just supports the evidence for a creator. So
Yeah,
Well, it's not just in that sense. I'm just talking about like if you're going to study why my pot on the stove is boiling, you could say, well, we're at sea level and the water is at 212 degrees and the molecules are moving faster and it's
right,
energy and therefore the water is heating up and boiling. Or the answer could simply be, I wanted a cup of tea.
yes.
So I put water on the stove and turned it on. Just as legitimate. They're both true.
Good example.
And one has an agent. One's about agency and the other one's about, the physics or
Observable process.
yeah.
I what was it?
What's that again?
Sorry, no, I just sort of froze because I was processing what you guys were saying, and I just thought to myself, blessed Ti.
But yeah, I would say other religions are true in some regard.
Oh,
but not true in the sense of
They're not
how they relate to God.
You're not going to find salvation in them.
Exactly. I mean, there's truths in it. I would agree there's truths in other religions because of the fact that you have truth. Like, for instance, there's in most religions, it's a freaking wrong to murder people. I mean, like, that's a truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, but when it comes to who God is or who, or, how he created the earth or, things to do with like salvation, then obviously, you can't have two religions being true about that.
I don't think Christianity necessarily even outlines how God created the earth or anything.
I take the stance that you take a somewhat literal interpretation of the beginning of Genesis. That's my personal stance on that.
In what way?
Because if God is all powerful, he literally can speak the earth into existence if he really wants to.
Right, but it's one of those things. All these words we use are very human flavored, right? We think of speaking, well, that's moving our mouths and making air go out.
That idea you're analyzing it too deeply. Like it's the idea
that only relates to planet Earth. That's an interesting.
You're right. There are a lot of words that are used to make it a little more understandable for human beings. The deal is, his point is, if God wants it to happen, it's going to happen.
Right. But an interest, like I said, but as far as taking it literally, I mean, the way it's translated is doesn't
Okay,
even make
then I think what you guys are mistaking is what I mean by literally.
okay.
Well, you have a problem with Genesis 1 through 2, 3, and then 2, 3 through 3. There's 2 different creation accounts in the Bible. What are you going to do about that?
I don't recall.
Different orders. It's all messed up.
This
Theology's
one's
broken. Christianity's not true. Boom.
Let me look.
this is
Not
this
Christian
is
anymore. That's
this
it.
is one of my favorite things to cite. It's from Revelation. It's specifically the second part of the second sentence. It says, "I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place." Now, this is what I tell people when they read the book of Revelations. It's like they take a lot of stuff as literal. I'm like, but notice the Church of Ephesus. I was like, notice the Church of Ephesus never freaked out that Christ was going to move a candlestick.
Okay, well, what that comes to is we got to understand what is poetic and what is like just literal hard history within the Bible. And so I think there's 3 types of scripture. Let's see.
But you still can't take it literally because of language.
Yeah, but the thing is the 3 what parts of the Bible are which type of scripture is as far as I understand is universally agreed upon.
I don't agree upon it.
It's one of those things.
Within Christian factions.
Consensus is okay, but it's not absolute. For me, anyway. I mean, I have to come to some sort of whether I agree or disagree with consensus. I don't just automatically agree with consensus.
Okay, so there are a few different writing styles. You have letters, genealogical, historical narrative, which is a large portion of the Bible, law, parable, poetry, prophecy, and proverbial wisdom and literature. So obviously Proverbs falls under,
I have definitive problems about the book of Daniel. Super huge problems with the book of Daniel.
Why?
What did Daniel ever do to you?
Daniel is a jerk, man. It's his
Damn, Daniel.
It's historically inaccurate. There are so many historical inaccuracies in there. It's ridiculous.
How do we know it's not the other records that are inaccurate, though?
How do you know it's that? You show me yours, I'll show you mine.
Yeah, because my stack's a lot bigger.
I think
I've never heard of that argument before. So,
if you want to have a book of Daniel, legitimacy argument, I'll have that with you all day.
Well, I don't have the on-hand knowledge to debate that personally. So,
but that doesn't ruin Christianity. I mean, I don't care if Daniel's true or not. Whatever. Wisdom literature, then. That's fine.
No, I'd say that the book of Daniel needs to be true. Otherwise, we got problems. Because it has to do with the genealogy of Jesus.
If your faith is built like that, I can destroy it right now.
I was gonna say if you're yeah.
Well, no, my faith isn't built like that.
True,
I'm just gonna say we're gonna have. I think there's got to be some shifts in theology in order to make it work.
All that needs to be true for Christianity to be true is the resurrection.
Yeah.
I don't need anything else, though. The rest of the Bible can be complete bogus.
I love.
It's important that we. It's important though that we still recognize the truth in the Bible in other areas as well. It's still important. Whether or not our salvation hangs on it is another question, but I still think it's important that we get it right.
Is wisdom literature. I think it has purpose. I think the purposes and meaning that they're getting at is true. I don't think the narrative is true.
I like the way you put that. It has purpose. That's the way I look at it.
I also like
God has a purpose for it, and I don't know what exactly it is. And I think it's that everybody.
It's a denial of history at that point because I believe it to be history.
All I need is a resurrection to be history, and that's it.
Is it necessarily them having a denial and again, I'm really sorry if these sort of statements I'm making sound patronizing, but this is me trying to apply TI where I can. Do you think it's as much them being in denial of history as much as you not being able to see things from another perspective? And I'm not talking about abandoning.
I can understand. Well, no, I can understand where he's coming from, but I do happen to know that all of the major theology people I know of, that I've talked to, and that I've learned from, and on top of that, all my pastors, they would say that is incredibly wrong.
So, Mark, you gotta.
I don't have any facts to back myself up because I never had to deal with this argument before.
Well, not that I'm appealing to my authority or anything. Not that I'm saying I even am an authority, but I do focus on Babylonian and Persian history, and that's what Book of Daniel deals with too. And there's huge problems with it.
Well, but here's the deal too. There's problems with the records in Babylonian Palestinian history as well, and the reason why is because there's problems with the records of Egyptian history, which those things are based off of. I happen to know that.
Wait, what?
You happen to know about
the Egyptian timeline is actually from what I've researched and been able to see of other people's research is incorrect. And from what I've been taught, the history of the surrounding area is based upon the timeline of Egyptian history as well.
Babylonians were very into their records and dating things. They're super anal.
Okay.
Super, I don't even know what you would call it. ESTJ about stuff. And it would be based on an Egyptian timeline. It would be based upon the Babylonian king and his reign. I mean, that's why you have.
Well, I think now that I think about it, that's more of that's not the time of Daniel. Now I think about it, that would be the time of Exodus that has that problem. So that wouldn't apply now that I think about it.
And I mean, you do have Jewish communities living in Babylonia and the Babylonian exiles a thing, and things like that are true. But as far as Daniel himself as a person goes, I don't know. I mean, he apparently lived to be about 140. Pretty old dude.
Well, Noah lived to be freaking old too. The thing is human beings lived longer back then.
To 140?
Yeah, even I believe, didn't Adam live to be like 900?
Well, and then that's a whole other thing. So then you have, in Judaism, when you say people are living that long, you're talking about their family. Talking about the lineage of this guy until this time.
Okay, I'm just going to withdraw from this because I do not have enough knowledge to back up my side.
Anyway, okay.
This is not my area of expertise. Like I said, like I've told you before, I focus more on practical matters than theology, which is why I'm going to school, because I need a lot of theological training.
Well, I don't know about that, John. So you have, like, Nabonidus and his mother could have been centurions. They could have lived to be 100. There's pretty good documentation for that. There would be rare, certainly. But the idea that people live to be like 25 and die.
Thought it was interesting. Mark and Audra, when they were talking earlier about like you both had the similar statement of like all you need is the resurrection to be true, and like I felt like that was, it struck me as more like an any sort of thing. Like here is here's sort of the nexus. Here's like the starting point, and then let's build from here. Is sort of how I saw it.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I see how I feel about it.
For instance, the covenant of Abraham, that the covenant God made with Abraham is key to, like, the reason why Jesus even set foot on earth.
Right. So, I mean, certainly the entire narrative.
So that would have to be fact, and so that would have to be history in order for that to work.
I don't need that, though.
Yeah, I mean it's not important. It's not that important why it happened.
I mean, if this guy that died and came back alive again, like, I'll listen to what that guy had to say. And if, you know, if he leads to that, then sure. Okay. But I don't only need that.
It's kind of what I was talking about with the dimensionality thing. I would like. I'm gonna reference binary code this time. It's like I kind of feel like Audra and Mark, what you guys are talking about is like if you were to have a value that was neither 1 or 0, and it's like because again in terms of like argumentation or whatnot, it seems like a lot of times the way people approach it, I'm not just talking about theology, I'm talking about like the way that people oftentimes approach problems. It's like, oh, is the value 1? And you're like, no, the value is not 1. And they're like, so then it's 0. And you're like, no, it's not 1. They're like, but if it's not 1, then it has to be 0. And you're like, no, the value is 2.
Mm-hmm.
But
like, for example, someone saying that the Bible doesn't have to be historically accurate to believe in the values and things like that of the Bible.
A lot of times it seems like if somebody were to say something like what you just said, the thinking is that if you word it the way that you do, then you're saying that in some way it's not true or you're not taking it seriously.
Well, you're not.
At least that's
prove it or disprove it. It's in a state of superposition.
Yeah, I guess I was speaking more to we use argumentation about stuff, how it's like this basically this whole theological discussion has just been my NI ploy to exercise my dimensionality fixation.
That's cool.
But I mean, it works well for it, I think. Because I think there's a lot of arguments and a lot of hate that people have, interacting with each other and trying to, I mean, I say discuss, but it's more like, heatedly argue these sorts of things.
People put too much stock in believing one way or another of how the universe started. Believe whatever the fuck you want to believe.
I think for some people, it's I mean, simply, and I'm like, for some people, that's just not enough. Like if you say,
yeah, they feel like they want to prove or spread the word.
Well, I mean, there's that aspect to it, but I think also there's this thing of like, again, I'm going back to the dimensionality thing because I'm fucking hammering on it. That's just I'm trying to concretize this thing. I think a lot of times when we're operating on that binary system, when somebody says a statement like, believe whatever you want to believe, there can be this fear of things are going to get even lower in dimensionality. Where we used to have binary, now it's just sort of this mushy, gray, lukewarm state. Mm-hmm. And I think really where there's like growth, where there's positivity to be had, is that you're not losing the binary system of being able to differentiate what things are. It's that you're moving upwards. It's not that.
Yeah. Well, what Tay is saying, nothing is ever black and white. That's the thing. It's all dependent upon the value you place on it.
So nothing is true or false.
Oh, is this? Oh, you're the person I was having the argument with the morality issue, right?
Yeah.
I
morality.
Guys, I gotta go.
All right, see.
All right, sit.
Right.
I guess sort of the way I'm trying to look at it is like, Tay saying nothing is black and white. I think whether or not things are black and white doesn't necessarily speak to the color impression of a larger whole.
No, it's an analogy. Nothing is ever just plainly true or false. It's the truth is singular, whereas something
Right.
dependent upon value is an opinion, but we believe it to be true or false depending upon.
Right. I guess how I'm labeling it. I guess I think I used the wrong language, because I think probably the more accurate thing to say is, yes, things are black and white, and they're also not. Like, I don't know. It's like, again, it comes down to perspective.
Yeah, I mean, my version of that statement would be that things might be black or white, but I can't tell. From my perspective, they're definitely not, but that doesn't necessarily elucidate the actuality of actuality.
Elucidate the actuality of actuality.
Right.
I'm not sure I really get that one. The actuality of actuality.
It's one of those things. There's whatever is, and that's not. And there's what I can see or what can be perceived about what is, but theoretically, what is does have more absolute value distribution to it than necessarily I can accurately perceive.
Right, because we're in between. We have both body and we have access to mind, but mind itself is active actuality, and it is the thinker thinking thought, and that's way more real than I can ever be.
Right.
And then you have, I think, this is what INFT was talking about earlier, my mysticism bit. I think that only goes so far. And then the truth only gets us so far. And what mind is Jesus. That's what intellect is, and we have access to him. We can have a relationship with him, and that's what we vie for. And that's only as so far as we can get to get in a relationship with the Father, because the Father is beyond all of that. It's beyond active activity. He's beyond being, beyond comprehension.
And what's the use of believing in that?
The use in believing in that is that you can have a relationship with the Father without knowing him experientially. You can know him without being him.
And what's the use of not?
What's the use of not what?
I was asking John.
Oh.
I think in that sort of thing is, I think, while you could have the rebuttal, what's the use of not? At the same time, it's like, I think more so you might be looking for, if we're going to be choosing one way or another, can we perhaps identify the initial push towards?
I think some people. I have this theory that some people prefer a positive if they're on the balance, and some people prefer the false if they're on the balance. I've noticed that.
I'm not sure you can believe to not do something.
Believe to not? What do you mean?
Yeah, that's. I don't think that's really an answerable question.
So, non-existent is always. So, if there's something you can't observe, you're always going to assume it's non-existence.
So I can't believe anything. Is that right?
Right.
Well, it's not assuming that there is nothing. It's just being okay with the idea that it may not be exactly the same.
Well, you said I can't believe something.
Oh, I don't believe in a higher power or anything like that.
You said I can't believe in something that is not, or something like that. And then Audra asked a question about it.
Oh, Audra asked. I was grabbing ice, and Audra asked about what is the use in not believing something.
Okay. Well, I would just say you have freedom. It's probably what you like. You're not
Sorry?
freedom.
Um,
I think,
right. Well, freedom of expression, is certainly a favorable thing in humanity.
And you're not beholden to anyone or anything.
Well, you can be beholden to yourself.
Yeah, but not to anything else.
Like for example, I rape exactly as much as I want to rape, and that's 0.
Now we watch the NTPs process rape through the TI.
I'm not doing that. I'm just not get what I'm saying.
Calculating the odds, how does this fit into the greater paradigm?
He's just not understanding what I'm saying. So there was nothing to process. It was just me doing that.
Well, being beholden to someone, being responsible for your actions for according to a person. Yeah,
If
I'm responsible.
you wrong, nobody knows about it. You won't be judged. You're not beholden to follow a certain set of
My
rules
Christian brain tells me to beware.
and whatnot.
I can't remember what context I said that. I think it's really awesome that I say funny shit and then other people like tell
We'll
me.
bring it up.
Right, Andy was there. I think I remember that.
I think Andy had to think about a few things. He was definitely laying there thinking about a lot.
Well, I mean, I really didn't want to give the impression that I was like trying to be patronizing or anything because I don't even want to say that I'd like, oh, I've been there because I don't know what his fucking situation is. But I mean, just in terms of argumentation or whatnot, like I've been surrounded by a lot of people that, as far as like actually getting into the process of, okay, let's haggle, let's parse this out, let's try to see if our concept of how we understand it is the accurate concept. It's like I've been in religious environments where it's constricted.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Christians do that. They build glass houses, or glass panels. If one of those panels breaks, then their whole building collapses or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of theists in general have the same brain chemistry that comes to dealing with disbelief and how a person will ignore sensible facts to suit their beliefs, which is something I'd prefer not to do.
Well, in your framework, you can't even say what a sensible fact is.
Okay, just like you said before, carbon is carbon. Right? You would agree?
So do you agree with that now?
Oh, carbon, in the term of carbon, 6 atoms, yes, no ions, plus or minus,
Cool.
nothing. So
Good.
carbon is carbon.
That's
So
sensible.
that's concrete. That's a sensible fact.
So the sensibility between you and the fact is also real. The relationship you have with this fact is also real then.
Comes from a trustable source.
Well, that also has to come from your sensibility of it.
A trustable source. Something that doesn't go through issues of, lying or things like that.
And there's something linking it. This has to be real too.
Yeah, from studies, things like that. Studies that are
Your
made
mental,
by companies that are trustable companies.
all your capacities, your ability to perceive, to sense, to relate, all have to be reliable as well, and true and real in order for you to accept said truth. The
Well, it
truth
depends
doesn't jump in your head.
Depends on the proof.
It's you as an agent that has to relate to that truth.
It's all dependent upon the proof of the truth.
No.
You can't
So
even really.
how did we ever conceive that carbon is carbon? And how did we test it? And how did
What
we?
I'm saying is my relationship with the truth has to be real and trustworthy.
And you think a secular, some kind of text like that, with no basis for the truth, with no proof, or you believe more of an abstract?
I'm not saying anything about any text. I'm saying abstractly, sure.
Okay.
You want to call it that? I mean, we're relational beings, and even a fact or so-called fact, we have to relate with, personal level, and we have to perceive it. We have to sense it. We have to acknowledge that we're sensing it. We have to trust our senses that we're sensing it, and that our senses are reliable, and then accept the truth.
Except it's been proven many times that human senses are extremely limited
Mm-hmm.
and very prone to fault.
Yep.
In fact, in a court of law, eyewitness testimony is the least important form of evidence.
Okay.
So what do you have that's a reliable source of evidence?
Well, a
All
lot of
evidence is
that my
perceived.
senses are basically reliable, and that's my point. Is you can't, in your framework, define what a sensible truth is, because your framework doesn't allow that. Because what you just said.
Right, your senses betray you repeatedly, so therefore you have to rely on a proof.
Perceive truth.
What proof exists that is outside of and not limited by your senses or other senses?
Are you asking me or Mark?
You?
Say, for example, a study that's been done.
The study is a thought translation via other people's senses.
No, it's a reading based off of a machine with a heightened sense, something that we couldn't possibly sense.
It's a perception of a reading, sure, but it's you can't even trust that the machine. I mean, it's one of those things. If you're going to say, you can't guarantee anything. There are no facts. There are no truths that you can guarantee or prove.
Well, that's just a ridiculous argument to make. That's
you
like
can make probable. You choose to make probable assumptions. You make probable assumptions. You make assumptions and you call them truth, and you say there is a, based upon my understanding, there's a high probability that this is what I can assign this a true value, and then you operate on that. You can actually prove it.
So really, you're just arguing about what a comfortable level of truth is to you.
That's all there really is, as far as human perception is concerned.
I mean,
and humans are proven. Well, we know that we generally assign meaning to things that don't necessarily have to have meaning. Like not deja vu. That's a little different. But like saying, your cat sensed that you were, emotionally distant or something like that. Hold on a second.
But I wasn't necessarily talking about that, Audra, but certainly under his framework, he can't say what truth is. Even.
Yeah. I mean, I was just taking a slightly different tack here.
You're totally right. That's why we have to say our senses are basically reliable, or we can't get anywhere. And he doesn't want to affirm that.
That's my basic philosophy. I work on operational assumptions, and the biggest assumption is honestly, basically, my faith in short looks like this: is that I spent a long time thinking about it, and I decided that God made sense, and I take His word on Jesus and the resurrection, because if you believe in God, then then that makes sense and all that other stuff, and then I go from there. But it's still like that's the big. It's almost paradoxical, because it's like it's founded on my own understanding that I can't be sure. Yeah. And therefore, I choose to be sure, and that's to me what makes it kind of. That was the final step, but
yeah.
Surety and anything else really.
Sorry, I was.
Anyway. It's keeping me up all night.
You know what? I made the threat.
What threat?
You were like, well, you're not talking about anything interesting. I was like, Mark's here. Andy, I know I'm going to do. Talk about theology.
It's SE. I don't know. SE is supposed to be in a slot that's pretty bad for me, but I have a pretty decent time if I'm not high reading people.
I think
Maybe it's more F. I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't think ENTP SE is bad. Well,
I think that we have some. Taking this from the theological route of people not necessarily understanding things, I think as we understand strength or good or bad with the functions, I think is fairly fucked up.
well, yeah, no, I don't know when I use that term. I don't like it when I use it either. I would say that ENTPs do procrastinate, though. So in that sense.
Well, because I think I was reading that it was like I think I'd heard something like it was like a flip being switched or something like that. Like whatever function, or like information sort of thing that you're processing. I don't know what the proper term would be, but let's stick with function. So like, let's say you're using TE, then like that is an extroverted judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like FE in a way would be the opposite of that because it's another extroverted judgment, but it's like it's not TE. So it's like if you're in extroverted judgment mode, if that's even a thing, then it's like
Elsie was doing that earlier.
And that's what I was kind of trying to explain to Josh is that it's like if you're talking with TE, you're not talking with FE. Like it's a flip switch. So it's like if you're considering things. Was that right?
Yeah, they're not together.
Like if you're doing or if you're engaging with any, then you're not engaging with SE. So it's like it's not necessarily that it's like as you were saying, you don't feel like you got like bad SE. It's not that you got bad SE. It's the extent to which you're like attached to a singular state, I think. So it's like if you have your dominant preference, which is any, it's like, even if you're, let's say, good at SE and you don't mind switching, it doesn't mean that, or at least I don't think it would mean that any isn't your dominant anymore and that you're actually, like an SE dominant or something like that. But it's that.
Well, I just say when I take the keys to cognition test thing, I get high SE scores.
Right. I consistently test as INFP on those things, and they tell me my other most likely types are ENFP or INTP. That's what I get.
I think you utilize NE quite a bit.
Me?
Probably not. Talking to me.
Ken. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the fuck I am.
You utilize it along with FE, I think.
Uh-huh.
At least that's when I recognize it most.
Right. I get sort of confused with that stuff, and I think that's, harping on about all the dimensionality stuff. I could probably apply that to my understanding of socionics and MBTI. Just because it seems like a lot of times it's like, oh, if you prefer NI and it's like you're dominant, then like, like you should find like NE like aggravating and whatnot. And I'm like,
Well, I don't. This was forever ago. This is like when I first joined a year ago or so. But Eric and I were having a discussion about NI and NE and how, like for completion, as he called it, like an NE Dom needs to find his NI and strengthen that, and an NI Dom needs to find his NE and strengthen that, and that helps in completion. Like for a lot of projects and whatnot in life or life endeavors.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're much further along in that regard than I am, if that's a thing.
Yeah. I mean, you could bring up the idea that as far as a type goes, you have you have these information elements or functions as they get called, and it's like I was having some difficulty because I was thinking to myself, you may have a type, but when you add on Enneagram, it seems like certain people have certain fixations when it comes to their type and their functions. But then on top of that, there's also your attitude towards what you feel about those fixations.
Cool. I have to think about that now. I'm gonna go hardcore.
Actually, the thought I literally just had as I was saying that is I was thinking about Enneagram with the gut, the head, and the heart centers. Now I'm thinking about applying that to type, where how do you approach type with your actions, with your, I'm not just talking about feelings like, oh, I use FI. I'm talking about like how you feel about your feelings. Like what's that sort of emotional, like heart center thing. And then the head aspect. It's like, what do you rationalize about the way that you're rational? Like, so yeah, like the meta level shit.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it a lot.
I think in a way the DCNH subtypes things kinda they don't do it for me, but they kind of touch on that because it's like the idea that a type could be like a subtype where it's like you've had strengthening of certain functions or whatnot. Like I feel like habitually I utilize a whole lot of FI and TI where it's like I'd almost, when I say that, it's almost sort of like a negative thing in a way where it's like I find myself being inhibited by that quite often, where I'm stopping and I'm thinking, am I making the right decision or whatnot? Or it's like, it's not even necessarily that I'm using them or using them well. It's more like there's fears tied to that. It's like, am what I'm doing, is it lining up with the proper thing? I'm using air quotes, like whatever that's supposed to be, whether or not there's some grand plan or if there's an etiquette I'm supposed to be observing. It's like, I'm sort of pausing to make those considerations, which then I'd also tie that to FE and TE to a certain extent. But my sense of what would make me happier is if I just engaged in life in a much more perceptive sort of way, like SE, NE, and then like, NI and I guess SI to a certain extent. But
well, I mean, you just said NI is holding you back a little bit, right?
I said FI and TI.
Oh, FI and TI. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see NI as... Yeah.
NI is trying to discern what the proper way to go is.
Right. And so my answer to that is, even if I might have it as a quote-unquote dominant function, I feel like it should take a back seat to the initiatory thing, which is like SE or like NE.
Okay.
So like interacting, I've done a whole lot of sitting around, so I feel like there's a deficit. I'm not saying, I need to become an SE Dom. That's not what I'm saying, because I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I've tried to focus on stuff for an extended period of times, and I get worn out quick. Because it's like, somebody's like, use your SE, and I'm like, okay. And I start like straining, like it's like I'm trying to pass a kidney stone.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in SE mode now. Yeah. And then it just like, there's more mental energy, and then I'm just exhausted because I'm flexing a muscle I don't normally use. It's like trying to shift gears on a car, but it's like you're not following any of the...
I wonder if it's possible to train yourself to be a different, because it's, you're flexing a muscle you don't normally use. What if you keep flexing that muscle?
Right. Can you work yourself up from atrophy?
Right. Well, like, because in high school and all that, like, I was way more introverted than I am now. And, like, I used to score INTP all the time. But lately I score ENTP.
I used to get INTP too.
Yeah, me too.
So another question that you could ask is, as far as type goes, I guess this is sort of my question to the people here is, do you see a difference between the type that you test as and the type that you think would
Are you not being honest with yourself? No.
What was that?
Are you not being honest with yourself? Is that the question you're trying to say?
No. It's like, is there a difference between the type that you test as and the type that you think would unlock or free you up to be yourself? And maybe that's sort of an odd way of putting it, but it's like, because honestly, in terms of
Idealizing
testing,
a particular type.
I honestly feel like I do that with INFJ. Like when I think about SE and whatnot being it's like dual seeking, like it makes the most sense to me.
It's the whole basis for why you can't administer a test that says whether you're a psychopath or anything like that to yourself. Only a professional can do it. I've been saying here that I'm always open to anybody who thinks I'm not something that I'm supposedly claiming, because that's if I read it something different, then please tell me.
Right.
Well, I find it very helpful regardless, just people analyzing you. Because I'm terrible at analyzing myself.
So one thing I want to say is I kind of like the idea of thinking of different types and then dwelling on, like, what do you, not just like think, what do you feel, like what are your conceptions in relation to those different types? Like how do they have an effect on you? Like the idea of them or what you've seen in other people? Because it's like, like I think I've asked people before, like if you could be a type other than the type you are, the type that you test as, what would it be? Or like, I've joked around and said like, which type do you think is your inner spirit animal? It's like,
well, like I like most people here. There are a few people that I dislike. So I wouldn't mind whatever type I was.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily believe I idealize being ENTP or anything like that.
I noticed for myself, I like thinking about like inferior SE, like, oh, that's dual seeking. Like I want to seek that in somebody, but at the same time, it's like I'm considering possibly doing welding, and I certainly don't want the thought that it's like, oh, I have inferior SE, I can't weld. Like I'd rather just find out whether or not I can. Rather
why
than
not just try it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to your question, Ken, would be that I had kind of tried to figure out what ways of being mentally were least stressful to me, right?
Right.
I tried to self-analyze, and then later I kind of put a label on that and called, oh, yeah, ENTP. Like, to me, it was just kind of like going, yeah, that's what already I had kind of figured out. Because when I was younger, I was honestly very INTJ-ish, but after I kind of examined myself, I realized that it was stressful, some of the like TE focus I had when I was younger. And it was like, oh, I can still do that, but I don't have to focus on it or worry about it so much. I don't know. It's kind of, like, I really don't want to be any other type, and it makes perfect sense to me that what I am is what is called ENTP.
Yeah, I mean, I'd second that. That sounds pretty spot on with what I experienced too. I think it's dangerous if this typing thing gets in the way of your achievements and relationships with people.
Yeah, I think that's kind of silly. I think it's interesting. I think it's a really useful lens for further self-examination and also examination of other people. But
not saying that I don't do that thing. I do. I do those things, but I don't think that's a healthy thing to do.
I think it's healthy. I think it's normal. I just don't think it's not to get to necessarily apply a label to whatever you're reading.
Yeah, I do that a lot though, and it's just a bad habit of mine.
I try to think of it as applying a hypothesis within a particular, language, and you go, okay, and then you can toy with that. But
other people are like,
I had to figure that out with social language. I'm still figuring it
out. I'm willing to admit that I need you people for this discourse, because I have this thing where it's like I desperately want to break my like current sort of TI conceptions of things, but I also hate being in that realm of like, oh, I fucking tore down my tower and now I'm out in the maelstrom.
Where the fuck am
alone.
I gonna go now?
Right. It's
Well,
like that's what I get pissed off with whenever people are like, yeah, no, you're wrong about that. And they convince me enough that I'm wrong, but then they don't help me build up a new thing. I'm like,
Okay.
you're leaving me in the rain.
All right. So what do you need more reassurance on?
Oh, it's I mean it's fine right now, but I'm just saying for future reference. I'm like, if you find me just being like, help, I need TI.
What? I heard someone
yeah.
ask for help.
Yeah. I'm like, I need TI.
Have you been here the whole time?
I heard you guys muted. I was doing some stuff.
Okay.
That's funny.
I just unmuted and I heard, help, I need TI.
We're TI, right? ENTPs are? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we
second
have
slot.
second slot.
We got NTPs and 2 INFJs. We got it's the best times, man.
But in terms of
First.
admiration of other types, I do admire ENTJs and ESTJs a lot.
Yeah, I have a certain amount of. As far as I understand ESTJs from what I've seen, they're. I think they're interesting people to get a lot of shit.
Give me
Yeah.
some shit.
ESTJs are a lot more complicated than they appear.
Are
I
those
don't.
like
I
the
don't.
executors or whatever.
They're brilliant.
I don't like it. I mean, I haven't interacted with enough ENTJs to really know, but I don't like it when people are, fucking with their feelings. Like, they're just a bitch. I'm like, I don't know about like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, but it's probably not helpful to repeatedly
Egg that
refer
was
to.
laid by not a chicken.
Right.
Sorry, I just.
Okay, well, see, that's an example of the TI thing. I need you to help me find a new euphemism because I don't like being without one, and I don't want to stay clean.
I'm sorry, I was just barely listening. What was the whole thing? Please repeat yourself.
People,
Nice ENTJs.
right? People just shitting on ESTJs because they're like, they're kind of a bitch. I'm like, I mean,
They're
I
hard.
don't know if I know ESTJs.
Elsie
Okay.
might be one. She might be an ISTJ.
Judge Judy.
Elsie, I'm pretty sure she's an ESTJ.
Just think of Judge Judy, and you have a, I don't know, archetype of an ESTJ.
Yeah, I guess I'm coming at it from two perspectives, Tay. I'm saying don't use typology as an excuse, and I'm saying use typology as an excuse because sometimes people are like, well, why don't you do better? Why don't you just do da-da-da-da-da-da, and it's like you gotta have some knowledge of yourself and be like, that's just not me. I don't know how else to explain it to you. Like you're asking me to do something that is not of my character. Why don't you go find somebody who's more like your character?
That's an interesting person. Well, actually, I was kind of laughing the whole time. Elsie was going off on Josh.
Oh, it was great.
I find it to be extremely entertaining.
ESTJs are like army commanders.
Yeah. The drill sergeant.
Yeah, like generals or something.
Elsie plays what you call it, a lot of like real time strategy games, and then
That doesn't surprise me.
Heck yeah.
She has to put up with family members that are like having like really shitty AI peasants that like the code's not working right. Like, I can't build that. I can't, and they're just running into the wall. She's like, fucking build!
Fucking build!
Can't build that. Work complete.
Work complete.
Work.
Work,
But I
work.
think I think there is an hour of that missing, of the Elsie thing.
I'm sorry?
I think there is an hour of raw footage missing from that Elsie thing. When she
Oh.
went. There is still 1 hour up, but the first one where she was very clear cut, I couldn't find that one. It was the best part, of course.
I just thought it was fucking hilarious because, like, she was like, "You look like you're dying," and I'm like, I've been thinking about this like up the past few days, like especially the old video he had, where his like his eyes are like red as fuck all the way to his.
What type is Elsie?
ISTJ, I think.
Or
I think
ESTJ.
ESTJ.
You think she's an ESTJ?
I think so.
Could be.
I've thought
ESTJ.
ISTJ when I first met her, but then or after a while, like that seemed to be kind of the consensus. But then I decided it was probably ESTJ.
And that ESTJ is really good at maneuvering and achieving outcomes, getting deals, bargaining, whatnot, debating.
She's not ISFJ.
Yeah. I know most of the older ESTJs and ENTJs, and I get along with them fine. I think it's the younger ones that I butt heads with.
Yeah. Well, ESTJs, like older ones, and I've only met older ones too, seem to know what's important.
Yeah. They learn, and they appreciate any, most of the ones I know, so that, you know, they're like, you're a little crazy and you're a little impractical, but I appreciate your any.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, they do like that. They like
Wait, really?
entrepreneurship. They admire that.
yeah, like it's like they kind of like, there's a little skepticism, like, yeah, maybe you should TE a little more, but at the same time, there's a certain amount of respect. Like, well,
I was confused. I was gonna go watch something, and she asked me to stay, and I was like, okay. I'm not sure why she asked me to stay though.
STJs like people too. Right, like I mean, as far as like memes go, I just would have kept figuring that like STJs were like, man, I can't believe that down at the deli they had turkey for $3 instead of $2. Can you believe it? Just like this sitcom sort of like shell of a person, and it's like, I mean, a lot of people when they talk that way, that's what they make it sound like. But it's like she's full of personality.
they do that too, though. Okay, you're like, wait,
They
we have
do
this
that on
conversation?
occasion, but it's not that bad. It's not like it's just.
No, it's not all the time.
Yeah, my mod does that quite a bit. It's neat.
I feel like both ESTJs and ENTJs, like, there's also a certain point, like, where you kind of win their respect, and then things get way better after that.
Yeah.
hey, look, another INFJ. Look at that.
Wayward Brain. You are the Elena, right?
Lena.
Not even 3 a.m. yet. I'm doing good.
Yeah, they do what they're,
Oh.
they're like pride animals.
It's not even 3 a.m. You had some, you had some light discussion, some